Small notice before we continue. If you want to get the Earth, Air, or Gravity Ball spell, there's a link in the video description. It's a Gumroad and you can get them through that. Also, the PvP support, the Gumroad has been shut down because I took note of all of those who contributed to it, and you'll be getting an email with a promotional code. So you can enter that promo code and get the Mage spells for free. And anyone who purchases the Mage spells from now on, those funds are going to help me develop more blueprint tutorials for this hack and slash series. So thank you, and let's get started with these tutorials. Welcome to the second video for the Mage, and in this one we're going to go over charge attacks and maybe dodging. So it activates with the right mouse button, and it works by holding it down, and after X amount of time you can start charging. Now the first thing you want to do is run a branch that checks if all these conditions are set to true. If your character is attacking, if he's not dodging, not attacking, not casting any spell, and if he has enough mana, you continue down in the true section. Then we have a list of nodes here that prevent spam. Spam meaning if you just right click once and let go, so press and release, your character would enter the charge animation and exit it right away. So it's going to look like a glitch. To avoid that, I have a variable called canCharge. It gets set to true the moment I hold right click. And after a 0.5 second delay, the branch will check if this variable is still set to true. So after the delay, if it's still set to true, you continue on and you set this variable charging to true. And charging here, it's editable. Then you have stop mana regen and cam rotate, which we showed earlier in the video, Mage first video. So this here prevents spam. The way canCharge gets turned off, it's if I release the right mouse button, it sets canCharge to null and charging to null and cam rotate to off. So if I was to just right click, press and release, this thing would get set to false, and after 0.5 seconds the condition would be false, so it would go down and do nothing. Like that, you need to hold it for X amount of time. You need to hold right click, for X amount of time, and then you can continue on and enter your charging mode. So what happens in charging mode is, let's go into the animation blueprint, and let me go get, it's not an animation montage, I think it was called, nope, that's not the one. Yeah, this is the one. Two-hand magic attack 01. So you see this motion she's doing, there's a notify called add charge that gets triggered pretty much at the middle where her hands are in the front. What this animation notify will do is, here, add charges. Here it is, add charge. So it gets the Mage BP, it runs this custom event called add charge, which we're going to look at shortly. It also gets Mage BP again and gets the charge level, which gets modified from add charge, and then it switches on integer. So these are the particles that pop up depending on which spell or which charge I'm at, and then these particles that I'm setting here I get them and I plug them into the spawn emitter at location, and I spawn them at the Mage's location. So just before I jump into showing you guys how charges are added, there's one more thing. In the Mage blueprint, we have charging. When it gets set to true, you notice it's editable. So here, coming down from the sequence node, I get the Mage and I check if it's charging, and then I made another variable called charging in my animation blueprint. So when this is set to true, in my locomotion from run, if you see here it says run to charge, this is my charging animation, and if it's true, if charging is true, then you can enter, and if it's not true, you exit it. It's simple. And there I have the two-hand magic attack 01 that loops. So every time it loops, it's gonna go and call this add charge event. Add charge is simple. It takes charge level, which here is the editable variable. It adds 1, and it caps it to 0 and 5, between that range. And then it sets it. Now, when that charge gets added, the number changes, and this is where you get it. That's why the variable was editable. and this is what allows the switch on integer. So it's from 0 to 5 the range. 0 doesn't do anything, so you leave it. Now let's go back to the Mage's blueprint. So this is how you build up charges. Now once you build them up, you can also reduce them. So if I had ice and I wanted to go back by 1, I could reduce charge and access fire quickly. So with the press of Q, here I get charge level, I subtract 1, I clamp the integer again from range from 0 to 5, and I set the charge level. Then when I want to release these spells, I have another input, so in this case E, and it sets casting to true. That's the first thing it does, because now the animations are going to start playing. Then it goes through a series of branches which check what your charge level is at, from 0 all the way down to 5. Now depending on which one it is, if it's 0 it's nothing, so casting gets set to false, you're not doing anything. If it's 1 or any of the others, it'll continue down the true line. And here it says play spell animation, so I have fire, ice, lightning, earth, air. So I set the animatage and then I play the animatage. And that's about it for accessing your charges and playing the spell animations and reducing the charges. And at the end of, let me just show you, and the animations. Let's go get fire. At the end of them, here I have a reset. So this reset animation notify, we'll call cancel attacks and cancel dodge. It's just a big reset, just like we showed earlier. Now I know charge level needs to be set to 0. This needs to be set to 0 once the spell is done being completed, and further on in the video you're going to see where we set it to 0. So in the next segment we're going to be covering dodge. To get your character to start dodging properly. Here you have a animation montage and it's playing a clip where the character dodges. Now at the end of it I have a reset, and that reset does the same thing as what I mentioned in the previous segment. It calls both of these. But let's go into the Mage's blueprint and see how we enter that dodge mode. So when you press spacebar, you have a branch that runs through these variables. It checks if your character is alive, if you have enough resource, if you're not already dodging, and if you're not casting spell animation. However, if you were charging, or if you were doing a basic attack, you can dodge and cancel out from it. So if your conditions are true, you set dodging to true, so it prevents spam. You subtract the amount of mana. You call cancel attacks, but you don't call cancel dodge. Then you check if your character is in motion. So you get velocity, check the vector length. If it's greater than a number, it's up to you to decide, but I put 5. So if it's greater than 5, then I'm moving forward and I'm going to launch forward. If it's false, then I'm going to launch backwards. So here the true and false value. True is positive, false is negative. You continue down and you play the animatage. This one is dodge front and this one is dodge back, and you stop mana regen. So that's pretty much it for dodging. And with this you can, while you're performing the fast attack action or a charge action, you can press dodge and get out of it. And in the reset, because the dodge ends and it calls the 2 custom events, it also calls cancel dodge, which sets dodging to false. And that's about it for dodging. Next segment we're going to start jumping into the fire spells and all the rest. So we're going to divide this segment into 3 bits. First we're going to explore fire, then ice, then lightning. Now something to notice is the segment containing ice is actually a pretty big one, because it plays a lot with the boss's blueprint, and there's a lot of things we need to modify in the boss to get this working. Fire and lightning are fairly easy. Actually, let's cover fire and lightning first, and at the end we'll finish off with ice. And you might want to take a break in between these 2 segments and this one, because ice is it's a lot bigger. So let's go into Mage _BP and have fire, ice, and lightning spells. Now these are custom events that get triggered from the animation montage. Let me show you. Here I have fire, and if you notice, I have the anim notify called fire. and at the end I have a reset. Where these two things are being called from, fire is over here. And that's the same custom event from my Mage blueprint. I'm going to go back into the Mage animation blueprint. I'm going to show you the reset. Here's the reset notify. And it takes my Mage blueprint and calls cancel attacks and cancel dodge. So we got fire, lightning, and ice. They're all being called the same way. They go into the character and play a custom event. Now let's go to the Mage and have a look at fire spell first, because they kind of have the same template. At the beginning especially. So first thing it does is it sets mana, it subtracts it. So let's say it's 50 for fire and 75 for ice, and it goes up for 100 for lightning. So whatever you want to put it. Set the camera shake and set your charge level to 0. This is important, so it removes all your mana charges. Then to enable a fire blast, you need some components in your mesh. First you need a sphere collision that's pretty big, or just as big as your radial force. You need this. You need to go add component, type in radial force, and put one of these. The sphere component and the radial force is almost equal in size, radial force being bigger. Now in the start with the fire AoE, the sphere, the sphere capsule. Again, the collisions are set to custom, no collision, and it overlaps everything, but camera and visibility are ignored. Object type doesn't really matter. In radial force, let's go from top to bottom. So here in fall off I put it to linear. Linear is further you are from the center, the weaker it gets. In object types to effect, I removed vehicle. That's because we're gonna apply the vehicle tag to our summon, so our summon doesn't get pushed back by this force. Next, impulse strength and force. You can set them to an equal value in experiment, and make sure that impulse velocity changes on. What this does is it won't take the mass of the surrounding objects into consideration, and that way it'll push everything back no matter what the force you set it to. The last thing, in activation, make sure it's not set to auto activate. Now we're going to go to the event graph and have a look at the fire spell again. So after your charge level is set to 0, you take your radial force and you activate it. So you drag a pin out and type activate. Then you fire an impulse. So drag a pin out and type fire impulse to get this. Next you take your collision capsule, you fire AoE sphere collision. So set collision enabled. And after a 0.2 delay you deactivate the collision and the radial force. Now the damage, the way it works is pretty much the same thing as any other projectile that does any damage, but here we're going to do a do once, so it doesn't quickly repeat the damage, and it'll pretty much decimate your entire opponent in a split second if they keep moving in this capsule. So you do it once, apply radial damage. I put the base damage to 75 and damage radius to 600 to experiment, but you could put in whatever numbers. And after a delay of 0.2 you can reset the do once. Origin, you want it at the actor's location, and actors to ignore, you want to ignore self, and then instigated by controller, it's player controller. So as mentioned in the other videos, is this won't affect you. You can get damaged by this thing. If ever it was to happen, well, make sure that this is plugged in. So in the next segment we're going to go over lightning, and finally ice. So let's go have a look at the lightning spell. So once again, like fire, there's two animation notifies, one called bolt that triggers the lightning spell to appear, and the other one is the reset. So here anim notify bolt calls lightning spell in the Mage blueprint. First thing it does is subtract mana, set your camera shake to a value of whatever, I put 2, and set your charge level to 0. Then it goes into this do once, and what it does is sets the timer of a function called spawn bolt, which we're going to look at soon. And after 10 seconds it clears the timer. What this function is doing is just calling a custom event. So this looping function of 0.2 seconds just calls this custom event over and over and over. And that custom event spawns an actor called bolts_BP, which we're going to look at shortly. And the spawning location is bolt AoE. So let me just show you this up here. Is bolt AoE. It's just a sphere collision, just so I can get a location. So I get the world location, and I break the vector, connect X and Y together, The reason why I don't connect Z is because Z is going up and down, and X and Y. So you see X and Y, you can push them left and right, but Z is the only one that goes up and down. So I want to spawn all the lightning bolts pretty much at the same height level. You can make a variation if you wanted, but I didn't. So you get random point from radius, and I put it to 900, and then I make it into the transform for the location. So it's gonna spawn this blueprint in that radius, a random point in that radius. Now let's go have a look at the spells in the Mage and bolt underscore BP. Now here you don't need to pay too much attention to the actual lightning bolt itself, but you can make your own in 3ds Max, Maya, or whatever. It's just a plane, and I put a really emissive material on it. To get its size, I took a skeletal mesh, and I made sure it was that of my Mage. So now you see this is the height of my Mage, and I scaled the lightning bolt up pretty high. And you notice the pivot point is up there. I put a rotating movement in it. So you see it's also coming down. I'm going to show you how that was done too. Pretty simple. So I have a rotating movement, and I have this capsule component that when it overlaps it damages the enemy. I think by now you guys know how to set this up. Just going to delete the skeletal mesh, and we're going to go into the event graph. So this is the small event graph for the lightning bolt. At event begin play, it goes into a timeline that scales the lightning bolt. If you're good at particles, you should probably use particles, but I used this ghetto system. So it updates the scale of the lightning bolt, and when it's finished, it spawns the emitter at the location. So that means the lightning has reached its proper scale, so it's hit the ground pretty much. I spawn an emitter, set the collision enabled, and after 0.3 seconds, destroy. The collision enable is that of the capsule that damages the enemy. And this is the same function of the capsule that we have in the previous videos. All the damage is done the same way. Now jumping into this timeline. You see I put a new vector called the scale, and I have the X, Y, Z values. So X I didn't need to change it because it's a plane. The Y value and the Z value, I think the Z value is going downwards. Yeah, it's going downwards. So the lightning bolt goes from like 0.1 to 1 scale, or whatever it is. And as for the Y value, it goes up and down. So the lightning bolt gets bigger, it stretches and squashes basically. So that's pretty much it for the lightning bolt. Then this is the blueprint that gets spawned multiple times in our Mage blueprint due to this function. So spawn bolts function calls this custom event over and over, and it keeps spawning this in a random radius, and that thing damages the enemy. It could land on you too, but it won't damage the player because of the way we set up the damage function, where it's instigated by player controller and we don't get affected by it. So that's it for lightning, and now the last section we're going to cover is going to be ice spell in the next segment. So let's get started with the ice spell. Just like fire and lightning, you have the ice spell that gets triggered from an animation, and once it does, it subtracts mana and sets the camera shake and sets the charge level to 0. Then going down, it's going to spawn an actor, a blueprint actor, and it's called iceball underscore BP. So let's go have a look at this, but right before we do that, I just want to show something in the blueprint interface called BPI underscore debuff. I added a new function called freeze underscore B. So this thing is going to get accessed by the boss and by that blueprint actor, iceball underscore BP. So let's go into that blueprint. So it's just a basic random mesh that I use from the boss, his little fireball attack. And I've had a new material, and here there's a sphere collision, and it's set to no collision. And also there's a projectile movement, so it can move forward. Now let's just have a look at the important things in the event graph to keep it short and on point. Anything to do with waves, you don't need to pay attention to it. This is purely visual. So at event begin play, after a certain delay, you set the sphere's collision to enabled. Next, after 10 seconds, you destroy the actor. You can ignore this one, it's about waves. It's a wave particle. So now let's look at the sphere overlapping. Once the sphere overlaps, it's gonna promote other actor to variable, and it's gonna set that other actor. You want to run a check to see if that other actor has a tag called boss. If it does, you move down and you apply damage to that other actor. And this damage application is the same thing that we've been doing all along. Then you continue down and it calls a custom event called freeze. And I'm going to show you what this is in a second. Then after spawning an emitter at location and a small delay, it destroys the actor. So let's go have a look at freeze. And remember, since we have BPI underscore debuff here from our blueprint interface, freeze can message that function we made called freeze underscore B. To do that, you type in message and remove the checkbox of context sensitive, and you need to look around for freeze B. So when you can message, you're going to message the other actor, and that other actor is going to be our boss character. Here I have a little set of nodes which basically have a 50% chance of going to true. So if I was to plug this in like so, my boss has a 50% chance of being frozen. But here I put it to 100% because every time it overlaps, it's going to freeze him. This is just for demo purposes. Let's go have a look at what this is doing. In our boss's blueprint, since he has BPI underscore debuff, he has access to that freeze underscore B event, and I put it right here. But before I jump into it, I just want to show some other things. The boss's graph underwent a few changes, and it was to troubleshoot a bug where he was sliding during long range attacks. So I made two variables, one called stop move and one called frozen. Now let's go look at the two main things that give life to the boss. One is distance player and seek player. So in distance player, let me go access the function. So if the boss is alive, you continue down and you run another check. In this branch, you want to see if the character is frozen or stop move is true. If any of these are true, then nothing will happen. If it's false, then it continues down, doing the same thing as it always does. Then let's go have a look at the seek player. So seek player, you have alive, you have flinch from the previous videos, and then here for is attacking, you can ignore pushed back, it's for another video. Stop move. If he's in stop move and it's true, you stop the character movement. You stop movement immediately. We're going to be using this several times further down to make sure the character stops. Now here in the next branch, if it's false, it checks if the character is frozen. If he is, it doesn't do anything because frozen is going to stop him from moving, and you'll see after. And if it's false, it continues down. Next thing is, in the long range, I put an attack condition. So if the character is frozen, you don't do anything. If he isn't, then you continue down this chain. Now, from the previous boss videos, you probably had something that looked closer to this, where you had a switch on integer with a bunch of set anim montage. I just added another switch on integer, and I put the range from 0 to 1. So there's a 50% chance of the boss attacking, performing an attack like so, or going to this function called reset, which basically tells the boss to keep running. We're going to have a look at this shortly. Let's continue down this chain. And you notice when you play the anim montage, now it just goes to character movement, stop movement immediately. It doesn't continue down another longer chain from here, it just stops. That's because in the boss's animations, I put a new animation notify called reset. So when that animation notify hits, let me just find out where it is quickly. Boss reset attack. So here, this animation notify checks if the boss is frozen. If true, it doesn't do anything. And if it's false, then it calls the custom event called reset in the boss blueprint. And also notice that frozen is set to editable. Now this custom event called reset, once again it checks if the boss is frozen or not. This is just you just want to double check in time. So if it's false, it'll continue down. If he is frozen, it doesn't do anything. Then you stop attacking, you set it to false, and you set stop move to false, which is gonna allow movement. If it was true, you wouldn't be able to move. You have a branch here that checks this stuff. I'm gonna explain what this is. You take your mesh from, you can just type in get mesh, I think here, like so. You drag out pins from it, and you get pause anims and is playing. Pause anims, I think, from what I understood, is it stops the bones from moving, but the animation timeline keeps on scrubbing. So here it checks if it's playing, if the animation timeline is still scrubbing, and if any of these are true, then you don't continue on. But if they're set to false, well, then you run the chain of command that we set up for the boss in the previous videos, where you face player. If you're far away from him, you check the distance again and you seek player. Now let's go have a look at actually freezing the boss. So this is our event freeze_b, and the first thing it does is sets frozen to true. Next, again, I did get mesh 2 times, and I have this that's gonna pause the boss. So here I pause the anims, and next set play rate, I set it to 0. So the animation montage or animation, their play rates are set to 0. Now they're not even scrubbing the timeline. Next, his character movement again, stop movement immediately. And I made a custom a material instance, and I put it blue, so it changes his material to blue. And after 3 seconds, it sets frozen to false. This is now we're entering the unfreeze section. It's gonna go get these 2 things again, these 2 nodes that we had up here, and it's gonna reset them. So the first one, on pause on him, is gonna be set to false, and rate's gonna be set to 1. Now the character can move again, and you set his material back to what it was. Now that's pretty much it for the boss's blueprint and freezing him. And I'm just gonna pause the video and check if there's anything else to see. If there isn't, then we're pretty much done with this. There's one more thing to cover, and it has to do with the flinch. So what's gonna happen is, if we don't edit the flinch code, when your boss is frozen and you attack him, he's gonna switch out of that material color, which is all blue, to indicate that he's frozen, and he's gonna flicker and go back to his normal material. What you want is, when he's frozen, he stays blue, and even if you're attacking him, it doesn't change the colors for as long as he's frozen. So to do that, flinch color used to get triggered before this branch, and this branch is a series of conditions that checks whether or not you can change his color. So if stop move and frozen are set to true, well, then you can't do anything, you continue on. If they are set to false, along with the rest, then you can set the flinch color, and this is going to enable you to stay in that frozen color material. And as soon as you're unfrozen, then you can hit the boss and you can see his flinch color appear, so he flickers with this. And that's about it. And if you guys have any questions at all, write it in the comment or send me an email. And thanks for watching. So let's have a look at a little demo. Let's have a look at the demo for this. The bottom left of my screen, you can see it says no charge. That's a widget that switches based on my number of charges. I could show that to you also. So if I hold right click, now it says fire. If I hold it again, you see a different color of flash. And that's done from our animation blueprints, when we switch on integer and it gets the charge level. So I can do it again up until I reach what I want. And if I want to go down 1 charge, I can press Q. And now I'm switching. I can go back all the way to fire. And if I press E now, so I used up my fire. And I also have no charges. So I could keep doing this, dodging and building it up. And then when I have what I need, I can unleash it. So I'm just going to do a quick breakdown of the widget. Oh, I killed the boss. Okay, so let's go to the widget. Now in the Mage's HUD, here I have a text block called no charge. So if I go into my graph, and also the color has a bind to it, and the text has a bind to it. So there's two bindings, and this is my where I change my text and my color opacity, and color and opacity of my text. So this is a variable text color. Here you go make slate color, and then you promote this to a variable. Now going to the charge text, first thing you cast to the Mage, you get the charge level, and you check if it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As you can see, 5 and 0 up here. Now, depending on which is true, here you need to set this to a variable first, promote to variable, and then you're going to set it here. So at 0 it says no charge, then fire, ice, lightning, earth, air. Then it switches the text color, and then it goes into the return node, and that's about it. And also, if cast failed, you could put it into return node 2, in case it happens. So this is what causes your text color to change. But this is purely optional. It's up to you to decide what the UI is going to look like. And that's pretty much it for this video, so thanks for watching.